First contact misjudgment. High Admiral Vex Toral stood on the command deck of the Glorious Ascension, flagship of the Hegemony's 7th expansion fleet. His 4 upper appendages were folded in formal satisfaction as he gazed at the holographic display showing the newly charted sector. The scout reports had confirmed what the long-range sensors suggested. An emergent technological species had established colonies beyond their home system. Humans. Vex Toral pronounced the word with the careful precision of someone testing an unfamiliar concept. How many worlds have they claimed? Fleet analyst Zarmev consulted her data terminal, the bioluminescent patches on her face pulsing with concentration. 11 settled worlds, High Admiral. 5 fully terraformed colonies and 6 mining outposts. Their expansion has been remarkably rapid for a species only 3 centuries into space travel. Remarkable indeed. Vex Toral's voice carried the harmonic undertones of amusement. And their military capabilities. Limited by our assessment, Zarmev replied. They prioritize civilian infrastructure and resource extraction. Their vessels are primarily adapted cargo haulers with minimal defensive capabilities. They rely on fixed defensive platforms around their key worlds rather than a mobile fleet. Vex Toral extended a manipulator to enlarge a section of the display, showing the human home system. Earth, he read from the designation. Curious. Their entire civilization developed on a high-gravity, nitrogen-oxygen death world. No wonder they're so physically robust. The Evolutionary Council suggests this may explain their rapid technological advancement. Added Sub-Commander Krell Vor from his station. Species from hostile environments often develop accelerated problem-solving capabilities. Vex Toral clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Or perhaps they simply haven't encountered sufficient challenges among the stars. The universe has ways of tempering unchecked ambition. The bridge fell silent as the crew recognized the familiar precursor to a command decision. The Hegemony had encountered 17 spacefaring species in its 12,000-year history. All had eventually joined the collective, whether through diplomatic integration or necessary subjugation. Send the standard diplomatic package, Vex Toral finally ordered. Inform them of Hegemony border protocols, resource allocation quotas, and administrative requirements. Give them a standard cycle to respond. As you command, High Admiral, Sub-Commander Krell Vor acknowledged, transmitting the orders to the communications array. The diplomatic package was transmitted on all frequencies humanity was known to use. It contained the accumulated wisdom of the Hegemony, 12,000 years of interstellar governance, distilled into clear directives for an emerging species. The message established the Hegemony's territorial claims, outlined the application process for expansion permits, detailed the resource taxation system, and specified the timeline for administrative integration. One standard cycle passed, then another. No response came from human space. Impudence or incompetence. Vex Toral mused during the command staff meeting as the second cycle drew to a close. Either way, we cannot allow unregulated expansion to continue. Strategic Overseer Meltuck, the oldest member of the command staff, ventured a rare opinion. High Admiral, our xenopsychologists suggest humans may interpret our communication differently than intended. Their historical records show a species fiercely protective of autonomy. All species value autonomy, Overseer. Vex Toral dismissed the concern with a flick of his lower appendage. Until they understand the benefits of proper governance. Prepare a demonstration force. We'll establish presence at their outermost colony and open direct negotiations. 3 Hegemony battle cruisers arrived at the human mining outpost, designated Theta Eridani IV. The settlement was modest. Atmospheric domes covering extraction equipment, habitation units, and a small spaceport. The Hegemony vessels took position in high orbit, broadcasting their presence on all channels. The humans responded almost immediately, not with diplomatic transmissions but with 3 vessels rising from the planet's surface. Primitive craft by Hegemony standards, barely a quarter the size of the battle cruisers. Their arming weapons systems, reported the sensor officer aboard the lead cruiser Immutable Doctrine. A defensive posture only, Commander Jevnar noted. As expected from a species encountering superior force for the first time. Maintain position and continue broadcasting diplomatic credentials. What happened next would be debated in hegemony strategic circles for years to come. One of the human vessels abruptly accelerated, its trajectory bringing it dangerously close to the Immutable Doctrine's sensor array. Whether it was a deliberate act of aggression or a navigational miscalculation remained unclear. The hegemony vessel's automated defense systems, interpreting the approach as an attack vector, fired a warning burst from its forward particle cannons. The human ship erupted in a brief, brilliant flash as its reactor core breached. The remaining human vessels immediately opened fire with primitive but surprisingly effective kinetic weapons. Tungsten rods accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. Return fire, all batteries, Commander Jevnar ordered, his voice steady despite the unexpected escalation. Neutralize the threat. The exchange lasted less than 6 minutes. When it ended, the 3 human vessels were reduced to debris, and the hegemony cruisers had sustained minor damage to their outer hull plating. The first time in 800 years that hegemony vessels had been damaged in a first contact scenario. On the glorious ascension, High Admiral Vex Toral received the report with cold fury. So they choose conflict over cooperation. A regrettable but not unexpected outcome for a species that developed in isolation. The decision was made unanimously by the command staff. The hegemony would execute a limited punitive action against key human outposts, demonstrating overwhelming force while minimizing civilian casualties. After sufficient demonstration of technological superiority, the humans would be offered terms of surrender and integration. Over the next 15 days, hegemony forces struck 4 human colonies with surgical precision. Defense platforms were vaporized by concentrated particle beam fire. Military installations were identified and neutralized from orbit. Resource processing centers were disabled but not destroyed. They would eventually serve the hegemony after all. Human resistance was disorganized and ineffective. Their ships, while numerous, were outclassed in every engagement. Their weapons, while occasionally innovative, could not penetrate hegemony shields. Their tactics, while persistent, failed to adapt quickly enough to the overwhelming technological gap. Then, strangely, the humans began to retreat, not in disarray, but in what appeared to be a coordinated withdrawal. Colony after colony evacuated its military assets, pulling back toward their inner systems. They recognized the futility of resistance. Sub-Commander Krelvor observed with satisfaction as the fleet regrouped after the successful neutralization of the mining outpost on Procyon B. Our intelligence indicates they're consolidating around their home system. A natural response, agreed Fleet Analyst Zarmev. They seek to protect their cradle world at all costs. High Admiral Vex Toral was not so certain. Their retreat is too organized, too deliberate. I expected more resistance. Perhaps they are more rational than we anticipated, Strategic Overseer Meltuk suggested. They recognize superior force and choose preservation over pointless sacrifice. Vex Toral reluctantly accepted this interpretation. Prepare the integration protocols. We'll approach their home system in 5 cycles and offer terms. 3 cycles later, all communication from human space ceased. Not just diplomatic channels, but all electromagnetic emissions, from military transmissions to civilian entertainment broadcasts, fell silent across the spectrum. Long-range sensors detected no ship movements, no defense platform activity, nothing but the ambient signatures of their established colonies. Have they surrendered? Krelvor wondered aloud on the command deck. Or collapsed? Offered Zarmev. Perhaps their society was more fragile than it appeared. Vex Toral studied the sensor readings with growing unease. No species simply disappears. Intensify scans. I want to know what they're planning. But for 2 more cycles, human space remained silent and seemingly inactive. The hegemony fleet advanced cautiously toward the edge of the Sol system, prepared for anything from abject surrender to desperate last resistance. What they encountered was neither. The celebration on the command deck of the glorious Ascension was subdued but unmistakable. The command staff gathered for the traditional victory acknowledgement, sharing ritual compounds that stimulated their neurotransmitters to produce the closest approximation of joy their species could experience. To the efficient expansion of the hegemony, Vex Toral intoned, raising his ceremonial chalice, and to the newest members of our collective. May they find prosperity through proper governance, the assembled officers responded in unison. Zarmev approached the High Admiral after the formal toast. The integration specialists are prepared to begin cultural assessments as soon as we secure their homeworld. Excellent, Vex Toral replied. I admit, I expected this campaign to require significantly more resources. The humans showed initial spirit, but ultimately recognized reason. A welcome change from our experience with the Dravenir Rebellion, noted Krulvor, his facial patterns glowing with satisfaction. The celebration was interrupted by an urgent alert from the sensor officer. High Admiral, we're detecting multiple spatial anomalies forming around the fleet. Vex Toral turned sharply toward the main display. Specify. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database, the officer reported, mandibles clicking with agitation. They're forming in a spherical pattern around our position. Distance approximately 3 light minutes in all directions. The command deck fell silent as the display updated to show the anomalies. Tiers in the fabric of space, each one a swirling vortex of impossible energies. And from these tiers emerged shapes that defied hegemony understanding. Massive vessels, angular and predatory, emerging like apex hunters from concealment. Human ships, but nothing like the vessels they had encountered and destroyed. These were titans of war, the smallest dwarfing the glorious Ascension by a factor of 3. Their hulls were midnight black, absorbing rather than reflecting light, giving them a two-dimensional appearance against the starfield. Impossible, whispered Zarmev. Our intelligence indicated nothing of this magnitude. Because they wanted us to see only what they chose to show. Vex Toral realized, the full magnitude of his miscalculation becoming horrifyingly clear. A communication request flashed on the main console. After a moment's hesitation, Vex Toral nodded to the communications officer. The display shifted to show a human face, a female by their dimorphic standards, with dark skin and eyes that reflected no light. This is Fleet Admiral Amara Chen of the Terran Defense Force, she stated without preamble. Your campaign of aggression against human outposts has been noted, catalogued, and will be addressed. But first, we thought you might appreciate a proper introduction to humanity. Humanity unveils its true power. What you're seeing is the First Response Division of Earth's silent vanguard. Admiral Chen continued, her voice calm and measured. The ships you've encountered until now were primarily civilian vessels with minimal defensive capabilities. We allowed you to engage them to assess your technological level and strategic doctrine. High Admiral Vex Toral fought to maintain composure before this revelation. You sacrificed your own people to gather intelligence. A cold smile crossed the human's face. No lives were lost in your attacks. Admiral, the crews you believed you destroyed were autonomous drones and elaborate holographic projections. Even the colonies you bombarded have been evacuated weeks before your arrival. On the command deck of the glorious Ascension, stunned silence gave way to frantic activity as sensor officers attempted to make sense of the vessels surrounding them. The readings defied categorization. Energy signatures that fluctuated between states of matter, propulsion systems that appeared to bend spacetime rather than move through it, hull compositions that absorbed scanning beams rather than reflecting them. Tactical assessment, Vex Toral demanded. Strategic Overseer Meltuk's voice trembled slightly. High Admiral, conservative estimates suggest any one of these vessels could neutralize our entire fleet. We are significantly outmatched. The hegemony does not surrender, Vex Toral stated, though the harmonic undertones of his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "We expected that response," Admiral Chen replied. "Allow me to provide a demonstration of why reconsideration might be prudent." At some invisible signal, one of the massive human vessels, designated Warship Alpha on hegemony tactical displays, emitted a pulse of energy that washed over the fleet. There was no immediate effect, no explosions or systems failures. "Sensor report," barked Vex Toral. "All systems functional, High Admiral," reported the sensor officer. "The pulse appears to have had no effect." Admiral Chen's expression remained impassive. "Look to your fleet's position, Admiral Vex Toral." The tactical display updated, and a collective gasp echoed across the command deck. The hegemony fleet, 57 vessels of various classes arranged in standard combat formation, had been rearranged. Ships that had been positioned on the formation's left flank were now on the right. Vessels at the rear now faced the front. The formation had been completely inverted, as if the entire fleet had been picked up, rotated, and placed back in space. "Spatial manipulation technology," whispered Zarmev. "They can reposition objects in space without physical contact." "A minor application," Admiral Chen explained. "The same technology allows us to relocate hazardous stellar phenomena, redirect asteroid trajectories, or," she paused meaningfully, "remove threats entirely from normal spacetime." To emphasize her point, a second pulse emanated from another warship. When it passed over a hegemony scout vessel at the edge of the formation, the smaller ship simply vanished. No explosion, no debris field. It was simply gone. "Where?" demanded Vex Toral. "What have you done with that ship and its crew?" "They're perfectly safe," Chen assured him. "Currently in a pocket dimension approximately 3 light-years from here. We can return them whenever you wish. The crew will experience nothing more than momentary disorientation." The implications were staggering. The humans possessed technology that rendered conventional warfare meaningless. They could rearrange entire fleets, remove vessels from reality, and presumably much more. "Your species has concealed its true technological level," Vex Toral stated, his tone a mixture of accusation and reluctant admiration. "Of course we did," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Humanity learned early in its development that revealing all one's capabilities is rarely advantageous. We've been observing the hegemony for over a century, Admiral. Your expansion patterns, governance structures, technological development, all cataloged and analyzed. We knew an encounter was inevitable, so we prepared accordingly." Vex Toral's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of intense calculation among his species. "If your technology is so advanced, why maintain the pretense of primitive colonies? Why allow us to believe we were successful in our strikes?" Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. "2 reasons. First, to accurately assess your intentions. Would you attempt diplomatic solutions or default to force? The answer informs our response. Second, to offer you an opportunity to reveal your true nature without the inhibition that comes from facing a superior force." Before Vex Toral could respond, the sensor officer called out, "High Admiral, we're detecting energy builds in multiple human vessels. They appear to be activating weapon systems." The tactical display showed 12 of the massive human warships moving into a new formation, their position effectively cutting off any retreat path for the hegemony fleet. "You've made your point, Admiral Chen," Vex Toral said quickly. "There is no need for further demonstrations." "I disagree," Chen replied. "You struck our outposts without provocation. You celebrated victory before confirming it. You declared your intention to force our integration into your collective without our consent. These actions require a response." The command deck of the Glorious Ascension braced for annihilation. Officers moved to battle stations, though all recognized the futility of resistance against such overwhelming force. What happened instead surprised them all. The human warships released thousands of smaller craft, each approximately the size of a hegemony shuttle. These craft approached the hegemony vessels not with weapons charged, but with what appeared to be repair equipment extended. "What is happening?" Vex Toral asked, confusion evident in his voice. Repair drones, Admiral Chen explained. The damage your fleet sustained during your campaign against our outposts, we're repairing it. Indeed, the drones were systematically addressing hull breaches, radiation leaks, and system failures across the hegemony fleet. Within minutes, ships that had been operating at reduced capacity due to battle damage were restored to full functionality. I don't understand, admitted Vex Toral. You demonstrate overwhelming power, then repair our vessels. Is this some form of psychological warfare? Admiral Chen's expression became thoughtful. In humanity's long history, we've learned that the most effective demonstration of power is not destruction, but creation. Not the taking of life, but its preservation. We could annihilate your fleet with minimal effort, but what would that accomplish beyond satisfying a primitive urge for revenge? The repair drones completed their work and returned to their respective carriers. The human warships maintained their positions, but their weapons systems powered down. Here is our proposal, Admiral Vex Toral, Chen continued. The hegemony will withdraw from human space and recognize our sovereign borders. In return, we will share certain non-military technologies that will benefit your people, medical advances, agricultural improvements, energy efficiency systems. We seek neither war nor subjugation, but we will not tolerate aggression. Strategic Overseer Meltuck leaned close to Vex Toral and whispered, High Admiral, I advise acceptance. We cannot match their capabilities, and they're offering terms more generous than we would in their position. Vex Toral's pride warred with his pragmatism. In 12,000 years of expansion, the hegemony had never encountered a species that could dictate terms from a position of such overwhelming superiority. Yet the humans were not demanding surrender or vassalage, merely recognition and peace. You could destroy us, Vex Toral stated, yet you offer cooperation. Why? Admiral Chen's reply was simple. Because that's what humanity does at its best, Admiral. We build rather than break. We explore rather than conquer. We connect rather than divide. But make no mistake, her voice hardened momentarily. We will defend ourselves with all necessary force if threatened again. After a moment's consideration, Vex Toral gave a formal gesture of acceptance. All four upper appendages extended and then crossed over his central thorax. The hegemony acknowledges the sovereignty of humanity. We will withdraw our forces and dispatch proper diplomatic representatives to negotiate formal relations. Chen nodded, satisfied. Excellent. We'll transmit coordinates for a neutral meeting ground. Oh, and Admiral, we'll be returning your scout vessel shortly. The crew might be hungry. Pocket dimensions tend to make one work up an appetite. As the transmission ended, the command deck of the Glorious Ascension remained silent. The tactical display showed the human warships beginning to withdraw, their massive forms sliding back into the spatial tiers from which they had emerged. Update our codex, Vex Toral finally ordered. Classify humans as a Tier 1 civilization, technological level beyond standard metrics. Approach with maximum diplomatic caution. Zarmev looked up from her console, bioluminescent patches pulsing with excitement despite the humbling encounter. High Admiral, the data we've collected on their technology, it contradicts everything we thought we knew about spatial manipulation, dimensional physics, and energy conversion. The Scientific Council will need decades to analyze it all. They offered to share non-military technology, Krelvor noted. Even a fraction of their scientific knowledge could advance the hegemony by centuries. Vex Toral gazed at the display where the last of the human warships was disappearing. They could have destroyed us without effort, yet they chose restraint. They could have demanded our subjugation, yet they asked only for recognition. He turned to face his command staff. In 12,000 years of expansion, the hegemony has encountered many species. Today, for the first time, we may have encountered our better. As the Glorious Ascension changed course to lead the hegemony fleet away from human space, Vex Toral made a personal notation in his command log. First contact with humanity. Initial assessment catastrophically incorrect. They are not merely another species to be integrated or subjugated. They are something we have never encountered before. A civilization that possesses overwhelming power yet chooses restraint, that could conquer yet prefers cooperation. The hegemony has much to learn from these humans. Beginning today, we shall. 2 standard cycles later, when the scout vessel that had been removed to a pocket dimension suddenly reappeared at the designated coordinates, its crew reported an unexpected experience. Rather than a barren dimensional void, they had found themselves in what appeared to be a comfortable habitat designed to accommodate hegemony physiology. They had been provided with nutritional substances compatible with their biology, entertainment materials translated into their language, and even a rudimentary historical overview of human civilization. When asked why such efforts had been made for a crew that might never have been returned, the human representative simply responded, "Because that's what makes us human."